Hello everybody, this is Senti, and in today's episode of Science for Senti, I want to dive deeper into the standard prism into array opening for celestials. Let's recall what we learned so far. In the last episode, we compared standard prism into array opening with Purifier first opening, so if you haven't watched it yet, I recommend to give it a look. I will link it in the description. Ultimately, we saw that Purifier first opening has some issues with scan timings, but still mines more Luminite, while standard Prism into array opening eventually has a higher bank due to the first Morph Core that has been used for the early Purifier. We will dive deeper into Purifier first opening in a future episode, so stay tuned. To catch up on Prism into array opening, these are the timings and results of the standard opening. Prism at 0 seconds, scanning at 25 seconds. If you want to see how different scan timings affect the results, I also recommend watching the last episode. Array at 35 seconds, and more prisms after that until full saturation. Mind that we also don't look at 3 array opening in today's episode. This might be a topic for another episode. What we haven't looked at standard opening is how things continue. As you can see, you pile up a lot of Luminite over the first 3 minutes. So after the first few economical decisions, there's definitely room and need to squeeze in other stuff, especially starting to Therium and building up your production facilities. So the first choice to be made is when to produce the first Morph Core, which is technically the second Morph Core after your initial one, so let's call it the second one. As mentioned in the last episode, there are basically 2 options. Either you build the second Morph Core right after the second array and before you produce another prism, or you queue a prism first and build the Morph Core after. The respective parts of the build order are highlighted in the slide. Prioritizing the prism over the Morph Core was standard until 0.3.2 economy nerfs for Celestial, where the array and the prism got a bit more time to build. With those nerfs, the question came up if this means we could squeeze in a Morph Core before the prism and what this would mean for our economy. As a reminder, we are using scan at 25 seconds as default scan time. This leads to only 2 seconds in yellow power and therefore has a pretty insignificant impact. Now let's check the differences. First of all, as you can see, there is no idle time for the prism when going prism first, which was suspected after the economy nerfs. There is still 6 seconds left after the second array finished until the prism is produced, not even considering travel time, which I estimate as 14 seconds on average. Comparing the consequences, you lose 8 seconds of mining from 2 consecutive prisms, which result in 2 times 8/60 multiplied by 150 Luminite per second, which result in 40 Luminite. On the other hand, your Morph Core is 13 seconds faster. This can be seen as a benefit for either defending rushes or to go into purifiers or production facilities faster. The correct choice really depends on the follow-up, so we will check results for both variants throughout this episode. After this point, there are several things you usually want to do, and you'll have to manage your resources and decide in which order you want them to happen. You want to build your 3rd, 4th and 5th Morph Core. You want to build a power bank. This is needed before you can construct any other building than a purifier. As you could see in the result table and will see soon again, a purifier won't bring your power level under 6 power and therefore won't bring you into yellow. You will always have enough power regenerated to be at 10 power or higher before you have enough resources for the first purifier. But before building anything else, a bank is needed to not go into yellow or at least not stay there for too long. Build a purifier, or even 2 as mentioned before, especially when early Therium is needed. Build a creation chamber and more production and tech facilities at some point. In this episode I want to extend the build until you have 2 full saturated arrays, 1 prism mining Therium, which usually means 1 purifier, Morph Cores until the 5th one. I also want to see the potential earliest tier 2 timing after the 5th Morph Core is produced. These 2 saturated arrays with 1 prism on Therium, 4 additional Morph Cores produced and the potential tier 2 timing is what I see as the lowest common denominator that should be the start of most builds. Some might go for additional Morph Cores before tier 2 or a second purifier, All builds produce different combinations of production and text structures at some point, but this won't affect the general analysis of the opening. Having a lowest common denominator is important to have some comparability between openings. Before going any further, I filled the simulator with Morph Cores numbers 3 to 5. Currently, this doesn't have any impact on the economy as well, since there is no competition with buildings for the Luminite yet. What we now want to know is what gives us the best macro and transitions the smoothest into the mid-game. While we could theoretically delay purifiers as long as possible and only macro with Luminite, I don't think this is a viable route in the current meta and not worth looking into. It's also worth noting that in this case you'd rather go 3 array in the first place. So we want to add at least one purifier now to get our Therium mining running, and we also want to get a power bank. When you take another look at the simulator, especially between 1 minute and 2 minutes, there is a lack of Luminite to do everything at the same time. Building Morph Cores, your first power bank and purifier needs to be brought into line. So the first questions would be how greedy we could be. Since the power bank doesn't bring any value to our Luminite or Therium mining, we could try to delay it as long as possible and only produce it after everything or mostly everything else is done. The first purifier should be produced as soon as possible though, so I'm prioritizing it to be built before the third Morph Core. Here is what this looks like in the simulator. We see the results for both variants building the Prism, respectively the Morph Core first after our second array. As you can see, I prioritized Prisms where prioritizing was needed, which is the case between Morph Cores numbers 3 and 4 on the Prism first variant on the right side. I prioritized the first purifier over the third Morph Core, which is needed on Morph Core first variant on the left side. Everything else is pretty smooth in the beginning, since there is no additional 125 Luminite needed for the power bank. But mind that we cannot build any additional structures outside another purifier and not use any topper abilities before the bank is finished, or we will end in yellow or even red power. What we now also can see is that prioritizing the Prism after the array gives us a bit more Luminite, while prioritizing the Morph Core gives us a bit more Therium. Only looking at our array into Prism openers, there are a lot of different possible orders regarding the prioritization of Prisms, Morph Cores, the Purifier and Power Bank, which will all change end results and timings a bit. Economically, I think the build we see at the moment is the best. One road that might be wanted in some cases though is prioritizing the Power Bank before the Purifier to be more flexible on topper abilities. As a last simulation for today's episode, I will give you an overview how this would look like in comparison to our quite late power bank. First of all, we can notice that the power bank will be finished at 1 minute 20 seconds rather than at 2 minutes 4 seconds, which would allow another scan or use of an early laser. Compared to delaying the bank, we'll use 17.5 Luminite on the Morph Core first variant and 35 Luminite on the Prism first variant. On the Morph Core first variant, we also lose 16.1 Therium, while we don't lose any on the Prism first variant. Potential early tier 2 is also delayed a bit with an early power bank. To be more precise, the early bank build is delayed by 14 seconds on the Morph Core first variant and by 7 seconds on the Prism first variant. For better comparison, here is the table that shows the different results and timings. I marked the respective best results. As you can see, the differences aren't huge. A few things can be said nevertheless. The early bank should only be done if needed, since it slows down everything else by a bit. Building an early bank punished the Prism first variant more on Luminite, while only punishing the Morph Core first variant on Therium. Ultimately, I have a hard time picking favorite here. I think it has to be decided on specific builds. If the little bit faster Therium production is crucial for a build, the Morph Core first variant is the way to go. So, thank you very much for watching. I hope you liked it. In the next episode, I plan to dive deeper into Purifier first variants and eventually also compare the results with added Therium mining with the Prism into array variants. But please also let me know if there's something specific you want to see in future episodes. As always, any feedback is really appreciated. Stay tuned and see you soon.